Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hey fans, I'm here today with Carrie Jackson. She is a certified mental performance consultant in Northern California, and she has been a professional in the field of sport and peak performance psychology since 2002. She is co-author of the book Rebound, Train Your Mind to Bounce Back Stronger from Sports Injuries, as well as co-host of the podcast, The Injured Athletes Club. She's been interviewed as an expert resource for articles that have appeared in publications such as the New York Times, Huffington Post, U.S. News and World Report, Outside Magazine, Shape Magazine, Men's Fitness, Women's Health, Runner's World, and Women's Running Magazine. You can learn more about Carrie on her website, www.carriejackson.com. And of course, you're going to learn more about her right here and now as we have an awesome discussion.
Thank you for that great introduction.
Yes, you're welcome. So let's start at the beginning, Carrie. What made you become a mental performance consultant? What got you interested in this space, not only of mental performance, but specifically with athletes?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with human behavior. And with early on with leadership, which I didn't realize in some ways was also a sort of optimal performance, but in a leadership role. And so I'd always been attracted to that. I did a lot of in my early career and like college years, I was doing a lot of experiential education, which is a lot of outdoor leadership. And but I didn't know anything about sports psychology. I had been studying psychology and thought I wanted to be a therapist, but then on my own, I was into my own sort of physical activities. I didn't grow up as an athlete. I didn't come into my athletic self until I got into college. And I did a little bit of race car driving when I was in college. And then I was a rock climber and snowboarder. So I recognized some of the psychology that was happening for me, but I didn't have any language for it. I didn't have any understanding of it because I didn't know it existed. So then I graduated and I didn't think I wanted to be a therapist. It was before the positive psychology movement, and it just wasn't making sense to me. Like I really wanted to work on, I didn't know it at the time, but I wanted to work on optimal performance. And it wasn't the paradigm that we were using at that time. That's not what it was, more about illness than wellness. So I decided to move to Tahoe because I was going to grad school, and then I was like, I'm not going to grad school. I'm going to move to Tahoe and play for a couple of years. And that's when I really started to understand the psychology of my own performance and coming back from an injury. And then it just so happened my mom found a brochure of an open house for a sports psychology graduate program. And I was like, what is this? Oh my God. And went to the next open house and signed up. So and just like, I had no idea what I was going to do with the degree when I just knew like, this is what I'm looking for, and just kind of hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I was drawing parallels in your career field of psychology. And at that time, it was more about illness and wellness. And I can draw parallels to the nutrition world with that too.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of nutrition being medical nutrition and, treating people who are sick and all that. But it's like, I always approach nutrition from that wellness standpoint of like, how can we use it to be even better?
Yeah.
And, yeah. So
yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So I had a very similar experience of like, I got into it, but then I was like, wait, this isn't really what I want to do. It's like,
now what?
Yeah. Now what? Yeah. And then, so obviously you do a lot of work. You have the Injured Athlete podcast, and kind of your book is about that as well. Like with that positive psychology, sports performance aspect, how did you then come to specialize in The injured state.
Yeah, an injury. So I had gone through an injury before I knew about sports psychology, and
Mm.
I had a very hard time regaining my confidence coming back into my sports. And especially at that point, it was a knee surgery, and trusting my knee climbing again with certain moves, I really struggled. And I struggled with the rehab and the pain management. And it was a tough recovery, and it wasn't even a major surgery. Then fast forward, when I went into the graduate program, I ended up injuring my knee again, same knee, but a different injury. And I was snowboarding, and literally as they're bringing me down the mountain in the sled, I made the decision of like, okay, I am going to take everything I'm learning in in the classroom right now about optimal performance for athletics and exercise and apply it to my injury. And I made the decision, I made the commitment to do that. And I took everything I was learning and applied it to that situation. And which is how I came up with that idea of, okay, my recovery is now my sport, and everything I was doing for snowboarding, I'm putting into my recovery. And I came back and had the best season ever. It was just absolutely incredible and so profoundly different than my first injury recovery that I was like, oh my God, okay, this is important, and this is something that needs to be out there. But I still didn't even really start specializing in it early on until I worked with a lot of injured athletes. So I was working with a lot of cyclists. And when you work with cyclists, you're inevitably going to work with injured athletes and people coming back from crashes. And so working with them, and then also doing some support groups in colleges, helping injured athletes, and just saw that there was this huge gap, like at a time when people were needing the most support, they were getting the least, and how much of an impact it had, that it was like, all right, it's time to specialize in this. Like there's not enough resources out there for injured athletes, and I need to do something about it. So then it became my mission.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. That's a time when people need the most support. And sometimes it can feel like you're getting the least. You're isolated from your teammates, your training, your support systems, everything. And that is when you need the most support. It's like when you're good, things are good. But when you're bad, things are really bad, right? Like that's when we need the help.
Yeah. And then they're like, we even have the term sidelined, which I hate, because it's like, all right, you go over there, and we'll and good luck, and let us know when you're better, and then we'll talk to you then. Like, oh my God, yeah, it's mind blowing. It's just mind blowing, and it's just because people didn't have an understanding or resources, and didn't understand what an impact the mental training could have, that there are things that you can still do. I think that's so much of injury is the physical, that you think like, well, you can't do anything until you're back, so we'll talk to you then. Like, oh my gosh, no, that's not, like, there's so many things. Like, not only do they need support, but there's so many things that they could be doing that help them stay connected to that athletic identity.
Would you be willing to share what are some of those things? We could go have, talk about this forever, but yes. I don't know if you have any quick tips for some listeners that might be injured right now and they're thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do you suggest?
Yeah. I think the first aspect of it, like the way to hold this space as an injured athlete, is to know you're still an athlete. You're still an athlete, and your recovery is now your sport. And now your job as an athlete is to recover and take care of yourself and help your body heal. It's just, if you're privileged enough to call yourself an athlete for long enough, at some point, there's a good chance that this will be part of your journey. So to recognize it as like, okay, it sucks, and I would prefer to not be injured, but this is where I'm at in my athletic journey. So what do I need to do? So sort of holding it in that space so that you can connect to that athletic. You're still an athlete. I think that's the part that's really hard, is people feel like, well, who am I if I can't do my sport? I'm not an athlete if I can't do the thing. Like, that's not true. You're still an athlete. So now how do we apply that? So one big thing is like really deliberately redefining your goals, and now making them. So a lot of athletes, they understand goal setting or their training plan. So now you're putting in your recovery activities into that training plan. So you're continuing that process of staying connected to your motivation and building your confidence by working towards goals. But you need to make sure you redefine those goals and make them specific to your recovery, instead of holding on to that goal that you had in mind before you got injured. Because if you don't do that, there's going to be part of your brain that's always sort of gauging where you're at based on that original goal, which is no longer realistic. So you got to take that off the table and go, okay, so what's the goal now? And that I don't need to gauge my feelings of success on that original goal because that's not where I'm at now.
Because that's also what perpetuates so many negative feelings around when you're injured. It's like that comparison of where you're at compared to where you think you should be.
Yes.
You think you should be striving for these other goals. But if you reframe your goals and recognize what I should be doing is going up the stairs once today, that's my new goal. Would I, pending your injury status. And then you're like, oh, I did that. And now you're in a more positive mental state because you're accomplishing your goals of recovery.
Yes, exactly. And really recognizing that as an accomplishment, right? That step, like going up the stairs, is just as huge as you finishing your marathon. If that's your, that you have to, it helps you redefine how you're gauging your success, which is really, really critical during that time. So yeah, but Rebound, the book Rebound has all of the tools that I work on with all of my athletes. Like if you want to know what to do, like there's so much you can do, and it's all in that. All of those resources are right there in the book. I think the other piece in there that's critical for injured athletes is it's so hard when you're injured to not just stay focused on the things you can't do. So really shifting your focus to like, okay, what are some of the things I can't do? I know that here are all the things I can't do. And then when you stay in that space, it does not feel good. So really shifting, a lot of the tools in there are, how can I bring myself back to the present moment, accept what's happening so that I can regroup and take action on what I can take action on.
Yeah, those are 3 great tips right away. So of course your book will give even more, but make recovery your sport.
Yes.
2, deliberately redefine your goals. And 3, shift your thinking into what you can do.
Yes, exactly.
That's really, really great. Something else that you said, it's like, I know it and I've said it before, but however you phrased it, I kind of had this like light bulb moment that, I've said before, like every athlete's going to get injured at some point in time, the longer you do athletics. And I'm not trying to encourage injury. I'm not trying to normalize like not taking care of yourself. I want you to do safe athletic practices and not overtrain and all that stuff. But like, yeah, the longer you are an athlete, like there's going to be something at some point. And I think just normalizing that is really important. And I don't know why I had this light bulb moment when you said that, but I did, of like, why do we, I don't know if I'm using this term right, but like, why do we sideline people when that's part of being an athlete?
Yes. Right. Yeah. So many people, like the majority I have met some athletes that had never got injured during their career, which is amazing and wonderful. But the majority of athletes at some point, you're going to be dealing with an injury. So why not, support that part of the process too? It's just part of the process. It's part of your path.
Yeah. So I don't know why I'm like so stuck on this, but I'm just like,
I love it because like that, for me, that was a significant sort of part of the mission, right? Because the way we're viewing injury, like they're big news. Like you're always, anytime you tune into ESPN, you're going to hear about injury. Every day you're going to hear about somebody's injury. It's such a big deal, but we're not really supporting the athletes through it. So it's like, we're all talking about it. It's going to be a part of the process. So how can we, and part of it, I think for so long, people just saw it as like the worst thing that could happen. And it is a very challenging thing that could happen. It doesn't have to be the worst thing that could happen. And so normalizing it in that way, that like, you are still an athlete. You're still a part of this team. Here are the things that you can do. So helping coaches and helping athletes know, like, here's what you are doing. You are still a part of the team. And now your training day is you're going to do your visualization or whatever the tool is and helping to normalize, like, instead of it being the worst thing, there might be an opportunity here, and let's seize that opportunity, or let's take this opportunity to, okay, you can't be, physically active. This is what we're going to work on right now in terms of your dedication to your athletic self and your sport, and that's okay.
So another thing kind of coming to mind just in myself and with clients and athletes that I've worked with is sometimes we have that really dedicated mindset and approach of I am going to take recovery, very seriously. This is my new sport. But then we face like setbacks, where recovery didn't go as planned. Like trainers told us, physical therapists told us, 6 weeks in the boot and it's been 8 weeks and I'm still in the boot, or that MRI didn't go well, or I thought I'd, or okay, I'm back, but I'm not back anywhere near the level I thought I was supposed to be. So I think it's one thing to be like, okay, approach your recovery with this very athletic mindset. But then what about when recovery seems to really drag on?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a significant, I talk a lot about the emotional roller coaster of injury recovery. And you're going to have these different time periods where the more challenging emotions are going to spike. So, there's just so many emotions you're going to feel throughout the injury recovery process. And sometimes you feel like all of them on the same day when you're like, oh, I feel really great and everything feels great and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then you experience a setback or you feel something in your body and you're like, uh-oh, what does this mean? And your thoughts start to spiral. So it just sends you on this emotional roller coaster, and encountering a setback is one of those times where it's normal for it to send you on an emotional roller coaster. So with setbacks in particular, one of the things that could be helpful is to really try to not spiral. There's a couple things. Like one is to remind yourself, and this can be both physically and emotionally, actually, like how I'm feeling in this moment is not necessarily how I'm going to feel tomorrow or a week from now. Like, so because our brain wants to grab it and go, oh God, what's happening? And feels like this is what it's going to be like forever. So just triggering that as a reminder to your brain, like you're safe, you're okay. How you feel right now is not necessarily how you're going to feel tomorrow or for the rest of your life, because that's what your brain's trying to like generalize it. And then the other piece is, this is another tool from the book that I really love. It's called Go Far. So Go Far means like, if you want to go far in your recovery, it's an acronym for, you need to be able to feel, accept, and recover. So feel is, you got to go on the emotional roller coaster. You have to allow yourself to feel your feelings, because what often happens is we fight against it. And when we fight against the feeling and fight against what's happening, we prolong that part. We prolong how long it takes for us to then come back to the present moment and be able to focus on the recovery. So feeling your feelings, whatever those are, and really identifying the specific emotions that are there. That's why we have this other activity called the emotion decoder, because we're not really good at like labeling emotions. We're like, this feels good, this feels bad. We just like clump them into these categories.
There's many more emotions than that. Yeah.
A lot. So you want to look at like, oh, I'm feeling grief, or I'm feeling confusion, or I'm feeling guilt. Like you want to pinpoint, like, what are you feeling, and allow yourself to feel it. So then that helps you move into a place of acceptance. Like, okay. And the language I like to use with that is like, I would prefer that this isn't happening, because that helps us stop fighting. Like instead of like, why is this happening? I can't believe this is happening. I don't want this to happen. It's like, okay, I would prefer that things were different. I would prefer that this isn't happening, but this is happening. So now what do I do about it? So that's the acceptance into the recovery. So that's what helps you then get grounded again in the present moment, so that you can focus on something that's in your control. Like, okay, what can I do? Man, you hit on a big one too. Those timelines that get set out, like, I see athletes get tripped up on that so much. I almost wonder, I've been playing with this idea of like, I wonder what it would be like, which would never happen because people need a guideline, but I wonder what it would be like if they didn't give them any kind of guideline for recovery, because that's every time. And I don't think that's the answer either, but I keep playing with this idea because people get hooked by the expectation. And then when they're not better in 6 weeks, and maybe that just was not a realistic timeline for your body. And sometimes we don't know that until you start the recovery process, but your brain grabs that and then you're not there and you're like, what the hell, man? Like you told me 6 weeks and it's not 6 weeks. And then you freak out when really it's like, we were wrong. Your body needs 12 weeks. Like we were just wrong instead, but we grabbed that so tightly.
I know. I'm drawing parallels again to nutrition.
Bro, I bet. Yeah, that's so true.
Of like and working with clients that do maybe resonate with, let's say, an eating disorder, and we might be holding them back from sport. So that's a different type of it's a form of injury, right?
Yeah.
And then we might say like take 12 weeks off of sport until you're fueled and you have energy available and like you're further along this eating disorder recovery. And it's like, sometimes that's not a good timeline.
Right. Yeah. Because the athletes that go, great, they get to the exact date and it's like, I'm done. And they think, that's it, I'm done. Instead of like, let's check in. Let's make a 6-week check-in, 12-week check-in.
Actually, I'm going through this with one of my clients currently, actually. And I said, the plan is we're not training. And she was on board with that. She actually came to me knowing that she, because of what was going on with her nutrition, this was her injury. And so she was on board and ready to commit to not training. But she was like, but when can I? And I said, we'll check in at 6 weeks. We'll check in. So we're at a check-in standpoint now.
Right? It's just like, that's awesome.
But we're just checking in.
Yes.
And another like parallel with nutrition that I'm thinking too is something I don't talk. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but in my practice, I don't set goal weights at all, regardless of what the situation is, disordered eating or not at all. Like even my completely like not athletes that have nothing to do with disordered eating, I still don't set goal weights because that's another thing of, well, if I reach this weight, will I then be healthy? Will I then be faster? Will I then be stronger? Will I then have my period? Will I then have my hormones? Will I then have my blood biomarkers? Like I don't set those goal weights because then you're going to get to that weight. And if everything's like not there, then we're thinking like, that wasn't right. And so there's just so many parallels. I wonder, because there's a way with nutrition that I'm somehow getting by with not setting super strict timelines or goal weights. And so it's an interesting parallel with injuries. Like, what if we didn't say you'd be in the boot for 6 weeks? Like,
yeah,
I don't know, because it also like
they'd lose their minds.
That's the problem. When you have a timeline, you have hope.
I get it. Yeah. Yes. So maybe it's that check it. It's the idea of like, what we're going to do is check in 6 weeks and see how you're progressing. Stop giving set timelines because it's making them crazy. It's really hard. Yeah. It's really stressful for the athlete.
Well, and I even think whether or not your provider is giving you a timeline, I hope that everybody listening to this can kind of make that mental shift.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what the doctor said or whatever of like, 12-week recovery, like in your head, try and think this is a 12-week check-in. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Yeah. Because they're within a system where they're, that's what they're used to. You're not going to change that system, but you can absolutely can change your mindset and hold it that way for yourself.
Yeah. I like this. I'm going to use this myself. Yeah. Because I think even in my experiences with injury, nothing's really gone to plan.
Yeah, it rarely does.
Yeah. And it always took longer. It always took longer.
I gave that analogy one time too, doing another podcast interview where it's like, I sort of feel like it's like contractors. You just have to add at least another month onto your recovery and probably more, right? It's just like, because very rarely it does. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There are times where like people, depending on the injury, but everybody's body is different. Every injury is different. It just recovery rates are different. So it does happen where it's like, okay, I'm ready, but maybe we need to hold it more like the contractor doing the remodel where it's like, we ran into some things.
Well, and it's so true because you typically do run into other things, right? Like you're treating one injury, but probably during that injury, other things were affected. Or, I'm thinking about myself, like one time I had this like extra bone in my ankle and had to have surgery. Well, great. I had the surgery. Recovery from the surgery should have taken a certain timeline, but because of the damage that was happening, like I had so many ligaments and tendons that were screwed up that took way longer to repair because it wasn't just about the surgery. It was about everything else,
Exactly. So. Yeah.
Okay, fans, I'm going to pause this conversation to let you ladies know about the Rise Up Nutrition Coaching Program. We have a lot of ways that we can help clients here at Rise Up Nutrition. And this is one of 2 amazing opportunities to get the direct help you need. With our team of sports dietitians, this program helps adult female athletes fuel to perform without strict dieting. How good does that sound? Finally, you will understand nutrition for day-to-day training, eat intuitively with foods that you love, and be race day or competition day ready with energy and confidence. We have more details about what's included and how we can help on our website, riseupnutritionrun.com/group coaching. Links are in the show notes. But I quickly want to share what a few of our clients have said about their experiences in this program so far. Sophie, a trail runner, says, quote, I really encourage anyone who has struggled with eating and lives an active lifestyle to consider this program, because it's so hard to know if you're fueling properly without someone on the outside looking in from an objective point of view. I now feel confident in my food choices, and more than anything, confident that I can actually eat more and that it will only benefit my health and my training. Sarah, another one of our clients and triathlete, says, quote, "For anyone that is struggling with diet culture, a history of disordered eating, and is trying to learn how to eat and fuel, this is a program they should strongly consider. I've been active my whole life, and trying to fit a mainstream diet has never worked. In fact, it's created more problems than good. Working with Rise Up Nutrition has made things very simple." So again, if you are an adult female athlete that wants to perform better without strict dieting, click that link in our show notes to apply to the Rise Up Nutrition Coaching Program, and we would be thrilled to have you join us. Until then, we will get back to the conversation. Really interesting. So you're a consultant in this space.
Yes.
You host a podcast, but you also actually have like a club, the Injured Athlete Club.
Yes, the Injured Athletes Club. So one of the really powerful things I've seen in my experience with the work that I do is how powerful it is to have a community of people that get it. And so that was one thing that I had thought about for a while. I was like, well, how can I create a space? Because I saw the value in when I would run these support groups, how much the athletes got from each other and being able to talk to each other. And it was so powerful. And I've seen that experience in diabetes training camp too, which is another thing that I'm a part of that,
I want to talk about
the
that
community. Later. Just being able to be there with other people that are in your exact position and they get it. They're just going to get it on a level that nobody else will. That there's such tremendous power in that, like connecting with your tribe. And so I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to do this online. And so when we started to think about things we wanted to generate some excitement about the book. So we decided to start the podcast, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do a support group on Facebook, and it's a private group and you just have to answer a few questions in order to get accepted. We hold that space very sacred and protect our community. So we really look at every single person that asks to be in there, and it's just, oh my gosh, a tremendous community in there. So if you're an injured athlete and you're on Facebook, I know some people even, they're like, all right, I'll just join for this group because I haven't figured out a good space to do it anywhere else. But it's just like it's amazing to watch these athletes in that group support each other, like people reaching out for support, reaching out for help, asking questions, and so many people coming in to answer, people sharing their wins. Like it's a really fun, amazing group. So that's been a really cool part of this is creating that community of like, hey, you're not alone. Because like you said earlier, you really feel isolated when you're like, I can't be with my people. I can't do my sport. I can't do the thing that I love. So it's already such an isolating experience. So to have a place where you can go and be like, you're not by yourself at all.
Yeah, I love that. I think what you said, finding your tribe, is important. And this is important for all the different stages of your life and many different tribes you might be a part of. But it's like your team, your sport is very much your tribe. And although now that recovery is your sport, you kind of need your injured athlete tribe.
Yeah.
To get you through some of those tough moments. And you also have a new Rebound Lifestyle mental training membership.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to talk about that, and maybe also just how it's different from the Injured Athletes Club.
Yeah. So the final chapter in Rebound is called Rebound Lifestyle. And it sort of talks about like, how do you take these skills and transfer them to the other areas of your life? Because it's one of the kind of amazing things that comes out of, if you really dig into your mental training during your injury recovery to help with your recovery and then help with your transition back to sport, those skills are going to pay dividends. They're going to continue to help you now because they're transferable then to optimal performance. And so oftentimes that's why athletes will find like, they sometimes come back physically and mentally stronger because when they've done that and apply it to other areas. And then I realized like sometimes my favorite thing when I'm working with athletes, one of my favorite things is, we're working on their optimal performance for their sport. But inevitably, they'll take some of the skills and try them in other areas of their life. And they'll come back to me like, oh my God, Carrie, I did this interview and I decided to do a pre-performance plan and the breathing and I nailed the job, So it's just so fun for me to see that. And then, so then I started to think about like, oh, you know what? There's something about like athletes also want mental training for life. So that specific tribe of that athletic mindset, but now looking at like, oh, how do I apply this in other areas of my life? Mm-hmm. That was sort of the catalyst for starting the membership. So so Rebound Lifestyle is people get like a mental training. I just did a huddle today. So we do live huddles once a month and people get a mental training tool of the month with all these handouts and worksheets and videos kind of taking you through this tool. Because a lot of times we just don't think about things like belief in your ability, confidence, focus, goal setting, motivation. We don't think about those things as skills, but they are skills. And so I give people the tools to be able to know how to strengthen that as a skill, like see it as a skill and strengthen it. And so there's all kinds of other fun stuff in there in the membership too.
Yeah. I resonate with this so much because I feel like when I think about my life experiences as an athlete, it's like being an athlete has not just given me, fitness and athleticism. It's given me confidence.
Yeah.
It's given me goal setting skills. I feel like being an athlete, not only is that relating to being a sports dietitian, but like literally like the ability and the skill set for me to build a business and like pursue my goals and to have confidence showing up. Like that's from athletics. That's from that mindset of what sports have taught me. So yeah, I think that's huge that sports is not just helping you be physically, fit. It's that mindset. That's a huge skill set that you can apply to any area of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I often tell people about when I wrote both the books, like I had to use all of my mental training skills in order to make that happen, right? They're life skills. And it's where do I want to apply this?
And going back to the injured piece too, when you as an athlete overcome the difficulty of an injury, like what you're learning so many skills of just, facing adversity that will help you in life as well, because we all face challenging times in life too.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. That's a lot of what the membership, the Rebound book and transferring into the membership, really a lot of it is about teaching the skills of resilience, because there isn't ever a time when your mental training isn't going to be able to help you. There isn't ever a time where we're not going to need the skills of resilience, because that's life. We're always going to be faced with something. So why not get good at that skill of being able to bounce back?
Yeah. So, another way that you are helping people with their mental skills training is, as you already mentioned, is it athletes or people or both with type 1 diabetes?
Yes. Both. Yeah.
Athletes are people, but I didn't know if it was specific only to athletes.
No, great question. No, yeah, it's like anyone living with type 1 or type 2. Yeah, yeah. For a long time, the camps were just primarily type 1, but now we also have type 2 camps, which is super awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, but athletes, exercisers, people that are just trying to figure out like, how do I manage my blood sugar with exercise, because it just adds in a whole different factor. Yeah, yeah. So everybody.
How did you get into that?
That is interesting. So that when I was graduating from college, I ended up just randomly working at a camp for kids with type 1 diabetes. And it was, it was part of my like love of outdoor education and outdoor leadership. And so I got to live in Kings Canyon, which is this just gorgeous, amazing place in California, and slept outside all summer. So I did it for a couple summers, and you just live outside for the summers, and then you run these camps for these kids. And oh my gosh, to see like immediately as soon as, some of these kids, and especially at that time, maybe had not been like their parents were fearful. And so they didn't do any kind of like physical activity or sports or anything like that. And then they come to camp and they're running around and they don't have to explain anything to anybody, why they're giving themselves shots. And you could see their shoulders drop. And it was just this incredible experience. And then a lot of the camp counselors had type 1. So I became really good friends with a lot of people that were living with diabetes. And then when I was in my program, they asked us to do this. I was taking a class on building a consulting business, and they were encouraging us to think of different niches we might go into. And I was like, oh my God, it would be amazing if I could work with type 1 athletes. And I was like, that's never going to happen. That's a pipe dream. Like, talk about niche. Like, I really narrowed it down.
Huge
So
need.
I was like, I don't know how that's going to happen. And then it just so like randomly happened that I was working with an athlete who was my client, and she was the head coach she was being hired as the head coach for this diabetes training camp. So it was before it started, and she had a meeting with the director, and the first thing she said was, you need to talk to Carrie. And she didn't even know I had this desire to work with type 1. Had no idea. She just knew the mental training, and she saw what they were doing, and she was like, you need to talk to this person. She needs to be on board. And so I think I worked for the camp for a few years before I finally told them, like, you guys don't even know you handed me my dream job. Like, it was so crazy. It was so crazy. So soon, like, I've been a part of them since 2006. And just,
I did a similar, as part of my dietetic internship, I did like a 1 or 2 weeks at a type 1 diabetes kids camp.
Yes.
And it really was great. You know, I don't have that lived experience of having type 1 diabetes, but so to be immersed, and it's just also, right, type 1 diabetes used to be called juvenile because you're usually diagnosed as a kid, although you can get it. So it can come out much later in life, which is why they don't call it juvenile diabetes anymore. But I think there's a huge need for mental support there, because for everybody, for the kid to understand, like, oh, I'm different than other kids. Like, other kids can go run around, but I need to test my blood sugar. I need to, like, taking care of themselves. That's a huge transition and a huge responsibility for anybody, but especially for a child. There's a lot of fear for the parents.
Yeah.
So I think that I don't know if the word coping is right, but just that the mental skills, like you said, is huge.
It's significant. Yeah. Yeah. We also have a teen camp and we have, this was a big dream of mine since we started the camps, was to be able to have a teen camp where we have curriculum for the teens and the parents, so that we support both of them, like the teen athletes. That one's just athletes, the teen camp, and then helping their parents deal with the stressors that come with being a parent of someone of a child with type 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm just thinking about is, right, so type 1 diabetes is, for any listener that's just not familiar with it, an autoimmune condition in which our blood sugar is not well controlled because we are not producing insulin. So we have to take medication. We have to take that insulin in order to metabolize our blood sugar. And so another thing that I'm just thinking about is how much stress for anybody, whether or not you have diabetes, stress increases blood sugar.
Yes, it does.
And so now it's like, okay, we have this condition where we have high blood sugar. And then if we're stressed out or not dealing with our stress appropriately, we've got higher blood sugar. And then we're adding stress of exercise. Now we've got more challenging blood sugar. So is part of, like, your approach to this also like a stress management?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So I've had a few clients actually over the years where and this is common. So for most of the people I've worked with, their blood sugar will spike. Like, when they get nervous, they feel anxiety, they feel pre-performance butterflies, their blood sugar will spike. But every once in a while you get someone where it does the opposite, which is fascinating. So again, it's like everybody's, just like figuring out how your operating system and what happens for you, so you know how to intervene. So I've had athletes over the years where part of our work is, how can I have the tools to manage the anxiety so that I don't get such a big spike? So I don't get a spike where I feel like I need to cover it with insulin, instead of, like, what are some other strategies? So stress management is a big piece of, like, putting some of those coping skills into what do you call it? Like the arrows in your quiver, right? Like, I need a bunch of coping skill arrows, right? Of, like, what can I pull out now? Because that is a big piece. There's so many factors, like, just always feeling like, you're basically making decisions for an organ. It's mind blowing when you really get to know that, like, people that are living with diabetes and what they have to do and how many decisions, in addition to just like being a normal human being, they on top of that have, think about all the decisions you have to make in a day. It's insane. And they have an extra, there was an actual study done on it, 180 to 300, a couple different resources had different numbers. I think that another 180 just for every day of decisions.
Another 180 decisions to make a day?
That you have to make. Exactly. Right. So, I mean, it's just, and you never get a break. So there are, we see with the type 1 community that you're higher risk for depression and anxiety because of all these factors. And so it's critical to both, be able to know how to manage your blood sugar with exercise, because a lot of people fear going low. And so they might avoid it, or they just don't know great strategies. So that was one of the things we teach at camp. And then just coping skills for life, for living with this. And how do I allow it to take up a little less bandwidth so that it's just, there's so many different things. So yeah, mental training is a big part of our curriculum to support that mental health piece.
And you are just such a perfect person to work with these people, because as you started this conversation, you want psychology, like positive psychology. How can this make your life better? And so when you have type 1 diabetes, that can be upsetting, depressing. Absolutely. It's not something that I wish for anybody, but you also don't want, just because I have this does not mean that I'm limited, does not mean I cannot live life to the fullest. I still can. You can do everything. You can still be a high level athlete. We've got so many pro athletes, collegiate athletes that I was working with recently with type 1 diabetes. You can do everything. It does take a lot more decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why somebody like you, to help somebody figure out like how does making these decisions become easier, less stressful. That's so important.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting too with what you do. Like one of the things I think that's been really eye-opening when people come to camp is that, when you're living with diabetes, food isn't just food. Food is a lifeline. Your relationship to food is very different than me, right? Than someone that does not have diabetes. And so helping people wrap their heads around the idea that you have to fuel the athlete. Like you're not just fueling the diabetes. Like if you are looking at optimal performance and you want to figure out how can you perform optimally, we have to think about nutrition in terms of how do you fuel the athlete, and not just thinking about, because it's just your relationship. There's a mindset shift that happens of like, an understanding of like, my body needs this in order to perform. So how do I make sure that my strategy helps support that, the fact that I need these things in order to go do this, event that I want to do.
And I ran into that the last 2 years. I've been working with a collegiate athlete with type 1 diabetes. And when I first started working with her, part of how she learned to manage her diabetes was frankly just eating less carbs, because it was easier. There was maybe less decisions to make, less medication to take, less fluctuations in her blood sugar. And so she wasn't eating enough carbohydrate. But then exactly what you said, then she wasn't fueling the athlete side of her.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, she was taking care and managing the blood sugar and the diabetes, but she was not fueling the athlete, and it was affecting her performance. It was affecting her game. And that's why she was coming to see me, because she wasn't, coaches were like, she's got to figure this out. She's not making it through, the game and the practices. And so that's what we started with, was this is what you need as an athlete. This is what your body carbohydrates need as an athlete. And then how can we, work with the medication and the diabetes, but instead of treating, I think that was really important shift for her to fuel herself as an athlete first and foremost, which is hard. I think probably a shift. I'm speaking just from this one person because she's coming to mind. But again, if you were diagnosed younger and athletics wasn't necessary, like maybe you did some youth sports, but you weren't competing at a super high level. It's like you have to grow with it. Maybe when you first saw your nurses or doctors and learned about how to manage your blood sugar, that was one way. But as you get more intense in your sport,
mm-hmm.
I think kind of transitioning to figuring out that sports nutrition piece is really important. I don't know if I made any sense there, but it's just, I think, a shift in, it's one thing to use nutrition to manage type 1 diabetes, but another thing if you are an athlete as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is really interesting stuff. And definitely, I would encourage anybody who is injured or anybody who is a type 1 diabetic or type 2. I'm not trying to be
mm-hmm.
selective here. You mentioned that your work in programming works with type 2 as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
There's just type 2 gets so interesting because it's it can resemble where our pancreas isn't working. So it can resemble very similar to type 1 or not so much where we're just resistant to insulin. We're still making it, but we're resistant. So type 2 can look a little bit different for sure.
It's very complex. It's very misunderstood and very complex. Yeah, because of exactly what you just said. Yeah.
You know what else, Carrie? I think there's a lot of stigmas around type 2
100%.
diabetes.
Yes.
Which is also why it's really important to work on your mindset, work on your coping skills, work on the psychology and skill set training that you have. Yeah. There's a lot of stigma around it. And I don't know if we're making any progress. I haven't worked with the diabetic population too much. It's just mostly athletes that I'm working with. And so when diabetics come, it's few and far between, I'll say. So I don't know if there's any progress that you're seeing or experiencing in that field is the stigmas around type 2 diabetes improving?
I think it's still very much there because it's so misunderstood. There's a lot of assumptions that are made, like if you have type 2 diabetes, it's your fault. Like it's not really how it works because, if you think that, follow that thread and think it through, because I think sometimes the assumption that's made is that like, oh, if you're overweight, you automatically have type 2, which that's not necessarily the case. Or if you're type 2, you're not an athlete. That is not the case either. Like, so there's a lot of assumptions that are made around that. And if you follow the thread, then that would mean that anybody at any time that gained a certain amount of weight would automatically have diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and it's not the way that it works. So it gets, oversimplified and so there's still very much stigmas around that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad that I kind of recognized that as I was talking. I kept saying type 1, and I'm like, wait a second, why am I only focusing on this? So I think that's really important. And I think in the world of athletics too, right? You can be an athlete and type 2 can develop. You can also have type 2 and then get into athletics.
Yep.
And then this is still something that we have to deal with and manage. And you're an athlete either way. So.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. I'm so glad that we talked about that piece of this and what interesting work that you're doing. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. The injury component, but I love that extra, like I didn't actually know that about you until I was preparing for this podcast that, she does work in diabetes as well. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite things. So actually not next week, the week after, I'm headed out to Atlantic City for our Stockton camp. So we get to do all kinds of fun stuff. So anyone out there that's a type 1 athlete that's struggling with like, I don't get how to manage my blood sugar with this whole like athletics thing or just physical activity, it's definitely diabetes training camp is like, check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I think kind of to wrap this up, like how can people read your book, become part of your membership? We already talked about the Facebook, the Injured Athlete Club. How can people connect with you or, join the training camp you were just talking about?
Yeah. The best thing to do is head over to my website, which is carriejackson.com, and you can get access to all of the resources there. That's where you can find the membership. There's links to finding the book. And for injured athletes in particular, you can check out injuredathletesclub.com. And there's a bunch of resources over there. And then diabetestrainingcamp.com is the website for, and you can connect with me and you can always DM me, like send me a message. I love connecting with people over Instagram. I'm at Feed the Athlete. Same with, which is interesting because a lot of people will assume like, oh, feed the athlete, you must do nutrition. Like, no, I'm talking about the thoughts that you feed yourself and that they're also important, equally as important as the food you fuel yourself with. But so at Feed the Athlete over Instagram and Twitter, and then Mental Skills Training for Athletes on Facebook.
Love it. Well, Carrie, I end every podcast with some just slightly different, the same questions, but different than what I've already asked you.
Okay.
If there was one food you could eat every single day for the rest of your life, but never get sick of it, what would it be?
Ooh, but never get sick of it. Sushi.
Ooh.
I love sushi so much.
Yeah. It's a good one. We've had a few other people say that one too.
Oh, nice. I was going back and forth between chocolate and sushi.
It's a close one. Close one. What is your favorite sport to participate in yourself?
Ooh. Oh gosh. Right now it's pickleball.
That is trending.
So I know, it's super trending. I didn't even know what it was. And then my cousin was freaking out about it. And he's like, you've never played? And like, they have a court at their house. And he immediately made me and my husband go play. And then we were like, oh my God, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
So that's my current one.
That's definitely trending right now. We learned it in high school. We did it in a high school gym class.
Oh, cool.
And it was cool, but it's definitely trending. So it's fun.
Big time.
Yeah. What about as a spectator? Is there a favorite sport that you prefer to watch?
I love watching a lot of sports, but I really do enjoy watching football, American football.
Yeah. Awesome. What's your team?
Well, it was the Raiders, but they left us. So it's the 49ers.
Okay. All right.
That's the team I grew up with, was the 49ers.
Awesome. All right. Final question. Is there a female athlete out there, professional or in your personal life and close network, that you want to give a shout out to for just being an inspiration and a role model to others?
Oh, gosh. Amazing question. I might, because of the work that you do, and we sort of talked about eating disorders just a little bit, I probably would give a shout out to Amelia Boone. Mm-hmm. So she's an adventure racer. She actually was the very first athlete that we interviewed on the Introvert Athletes Club podcast. And she's been really open about her journey with injuries and the connection to disordered eating. And she's a remarkable, incredible person, a really phenomenal athlete, but just really, I think has had a very big impact on a lot of athletes by being so open about her journey. So she's someone I would give a shout out to.
Yeah. Shout out to Amelia Boone. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. This has been a wonderful conversation. We appreciate all the work you do. And I hope that people listening learned something, resonated, and will take you up on all that you are offering and the ways that you can help out our athletes, our injured athletes, and our diabetic athletes.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S recovery race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to our private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.